If you're like me, you spend lots of time poring over maps, looking at weather data, all in an effort to help predict when and where my best times to hunt will be. It'd be nice if there was a reliable source with all this information in one place. Enter the Spartan Forge app. Unlike some other predictive apps on the market, Spartan Forge was created from military combat intelligence experience tailored for hunters, and stands at the nexus of machine learning and whitetail deer hunting. No more man-made algorithms. This is a predictive model based on real GPS collared deer data, historical and predictive weather, and the next level of mapping imagery, all at my fingertips. I've been using the iOS app this season, and it has replaced all my other mapping tools. Visit SpartanForge.ai and sign up today, or head to your iOS or Android app store. Use the promo code TRUTH to save some money and download it today. Mobile hunters, if you're interested in upping your mobile game, then head to tetherednation.com and check out their saddle gear. There are a few things you can actually buy that will help you become a better deer hunter or give you the freedom to hunt any tree or any situation. This is the reason why I started saddle hunting in the first place and why I use Tethered's gear. I can honestly say that Tethered's saddle gear has changed how I hunt for the better. Big tree, little tree, from the ground, it doesn't matter. I'm untethered by my gear to hunt the best setup for the situation, instead of hunting for a tree that my gear can use. My current core setup consists of the Phantom saddle, Tethered 1-sticks, and the Predator platform, along with an assortment of their accessories. So if you want to up your mobile game, head over to tetherednation.com.
Welcome to the Truth from a Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Spartan Forge. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 329. Today, I'm joined by my buddy Travis Keith to talk about hard seasons, and being delayed is not being denied. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you are doing well. Hope you are feeling fine. It is hard to believe that it's almost April. I'm kind of like, where did the winter go? I feel like it's been nothing but freaking rain here in the eastern part of PA that is continuing to put a damper, or dampening, I should say, no pun intended, dampening my scouting efforts. And so we're yet again in another weekend of pouring rain and miserable weather that's going to keep me inside for the most part. So I'm going to try to make the best of it and try to get some work done, probably do some gear maintenance. Good time of year to just, especially the trail cameras, right? Because a lot of times you just kind of yank those out of the woods if you're not leaving them in year round, and you just kind of toss them in a box. Or for me, I toss them in a cabinet in my basement, in my archery room. And it's one of those things you should probably do more often. I know Chad and the guys from Exodus will give me grief about it, but I don't clean them out as often as I should. And so I try to be mindful. And when I get like a wet weekend, or, that I have some time that's not allocated to something else already, I try to take all the batteries out of the battery trays, clean it out, use a little canned air, clean out, the inside, like where all the menu buttons and stuff are, spray out, with some canned air, the area that the batteries go into, is just so everything's kind of clean and operational and ready for next year. If I haven't yet, kind of get everything off the SD cards, reformat all the SD cards. That way, when I do start putting them back in the timber, they are ready to go, and I'm not spending time trying to reformat cards and stuff like that, because that's just a pain in the ass. So I think that's what's on my docket right now, just because, for me, I usually start putting cameras back out in the woods, in April. Usually whenever I'm out turkey hunting, I'll carry some cameras with me if there's a spot I come across, or if there's an area that I know I want to hang a camera, or I'm hunting close, turkeys where I've historically hung cameras that have been good. I'll just carry one or two with me and pop them out, and kind of try to kill two birds with one stone. But with that, not a whole lot from a deer hunting perspective to report. Just a lot of jiu-jitsu going on. So we're just going to go ahead and jump into today's show. Have my buddy Travis Keith on. You guys might remember him. It was probably close to 2 years ago since I had him on last. That was the only time he was on. Travis is from Oklahoma. The way I learned, or kind of became friends with Travis, was actually through Eddie Claypool. Had Eddie on, and Eddie, thinks highly of Travis, and said, hey, it's a fella you might want to consider having on if he would come on. And so had Travis on about 2 years ago. He and I have stayed in touch, during this time, texting each other during hunting season and stuff like that. And he is just a killer. But beyond being a killer, like he is just one of those guys that, you know, everything he does is intentional and it's with the right reasons or the right purposes in mind. And that's kind of how he approaches his hunting as well. And so it's really kind of interesting. You know, he's a tactician and a strategist when it comes to hunting. But for him, there's a guide that's happening beyond the things that he's doing. He's just kind of putting the work in, but there's, you know, his faith is really what's guiding him through his season and through, you know, everything that he does. And so the past 2 years, he's had some interesting, not this past year so much, but an interesting challenge during the 2021 season that it really kind of seemed like things were kind of stacked against him. But in true kind of Travis Keith fashion, he ended up with some field tags, and he tells that story. And then this past year, you know, was a grinder for him, and they were kind of really polar opposites from one year to the next, just in terms of how much time he was actually getting to spend in the timber and had to spend in the timber to actually try to get something done. And so he tells that story, and then there's a portion of this past season where he made a critical mistake and didn't listen to his gut, listening to that little voice in your head that you should probably always listen to. He denied it access, if you will. And it ended up burning him. And so he talks a little bit about that and the lessons that he learned from that. But the big takeaway for this episode and what we kind of talk a lot about is that being delayed in life, whether it's hunting or anything else, is not being denied. And so with that, I'll go ahead and just jump into today's show. And as always, thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I have on my buddy. It's been a little while since he's been on, but I have the man on with 2 first names, Mr. Travis Keith. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, how's it going, Clint?
Good,
Appreciate
man.
you having me on.
Yeah. I'm glad you were willing to come back on. I didn't scare you off the first time. That's always a good sign, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Good time.
Nice. I always like to introduce you as the man with 2 first names. I always just feel like people with 2 first names are interesting people.
Yeah. I mean, you include the middle name. Sometimes I tell people, I'm like, yeah, I've got 3 first names. You know, it's like Travis, Ryan, Keith, you know. So,
that is 3 first names, man. Like, for sure.
It has a ring to it.
That's right. You should have been a country artist, dude. Like, I think.
Yeah, Cousin Toby. I tell everybody Cousin Toby, and they're like, really? And I'm like, no, not really. Like, no.
That's funny, man. Cousin Toby. Tell Cousin Toby to break off a ranch somewhere for some good private hunting. You know what I mean?
No kidding.
That's awesome, man. So how are things been, man? How's Oklahoma? I've been watching a lot of stuff going down in Oklahoma this past week, and I was actually, as we were texting, getting ready for this, setting up, you know, time for us to get together for this podcast, I was watching the NCAA National Wrestling Tournament, which was in Oklahoma this year. So I was envious of you. Yeah, Tulsa.
Yeah, that was pretty exciting. Yeah, it was in Tulsa, so that's not too far. I mean, I work in Tulsa, and I've worked downtown in some of those buildings and been to BOK and stuff. So yeah, that was super exciting. Big deal for Tulsa, and that was exciting to watch some of those matches for sure.
Yeah. Oh, did you watch some of it?
Yeah. Saturday I watched quite a few of them, and man, it's just amazing. Like, the athleticism of those guys, the level that they are grappling at is just like
it's unreal, man.
Yeah, it's unreal. It's hard to explain really, but they're amazing athletes.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap your mind around, and like the hard part too is just, you know, wrapping your mind around like those are the best of the best in the U.S. in college, and then there's a level above that like even the best of the best from that group
right
may never make it internationally, even if they aspire to wrestle internationally. You know what I mean? Like it's just it's crazy how, you know, how talented they are, and in that even though as good as they are, they still might not be good enough to make a world team or an Olympic team or whatever the case is. The highlight for me though as a Penn State fan was watching Spencer Lee get pinned in the semifinals. That was
insane. Yeah, that was crazy.
yeah, I couldn't believe. I mean, you know, I try not to. I mean, he's a kid, you know. Oh, I say a kid, but he's in his early 20s. But you know, I don't ever wish bad luck on somebody. But he did kind of spur, you know, he did kind of shun Penn State. He's a Pennsylvania guy. Like I watched him all through high school, so it's like I've watched him since like he. I don't want to say burst onto the scene. I probably started hearing about him when he was probably a sophomore in high school. So I watched like his sophomore, junior, and senior year pretty closely because I knew he was on Penn State's radar for a recruit. And I had my fingers crossed that he was going to go to Penn State, and then he ended up going to, you know, the dark side to Iowa. which is terrible. And even still, I followed his career because I knew he was going to be really good. And it's just, I mean, I wasn't glad to see him lose because I don't want to wish like bad luck on, some kid who's trying to achieve his goals and his dreams and stuff. But it was an exciting part of the tournament. I mean, it was probably the biggest upset in 40 years, I would say, is what they were saying.
That and Dayton Fix. I mean, I watched, he's an Oklahoma guy, Sand Springs, which is local. And he's just like an amazing freak, and that's a big upset.
That was a huge upset because I was watching the split screen. So I was watching Roman Bravo Young on the other side, in the semis. And I'm kind of watching the Aruja match with Fix. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. I was like, Aruja's going to beat Fix. And again, he's one of those guys, like, I've watched interviews with him. I don't know a whole lot about Fix other than just what I've followed. And he just seems like a nice guy. Like he's a hometown guy that stayed in Oklahoma to wrestle at Oklahoma and, does a lot, he's a hero to a lot of kids that are around there and stuff like that. And I'm like, as good as he is, he's got like 2 world silver medals, and he's just never won an NCAA title, which is just crazy to think, Just going back to what we were saying, it's like those guys are like the elite of the elite, and then there's a level above that still.
And it's amazing that the level they compete at and the exchanges they're going through, it's just like, I don't even know how they just did that.
It makes my head spin. Like, I've been doing jiu-jitsu coming up on like a year now, and I wrestled all growing up and stuff like that. And I have a buddy at the jiu-jitsu gym who wrestled in college, and that's who I watched, the finals with on Saturday. We got together and watched, and just even rolling with him during jiu-jitsu training, and just and he was a good wrestler, but like he was average, he would say, for like college ranks or whatever. And just rolling with him whenever he hits wrestling techniques and stuff like that, because he'll still hit wrestling techniques that work in jiu-jitsu. It's just like, he's so quick at it, and it's so like it happens like now, and I'm like, I don't know what just happened, and then to think like, and to think still he's like 31, so he's past like his prime of wrestling, you know what I mean? And then even when he was in his prime of wrestling, he was like, I was average, you know what I mean? I'm like, it's just a whole different level, man. But
my brother is like that. He was a good wrestler, and then he's been doing jiu-jitsu for about 2 years now.
Oh, nice. And
he's older than me, so he's like 48, 49 maybe. But we're about the same size. He's a little bit small. He's about 165, but and I mean, he walked in the jiu-jitsu room just, with wrestling skill, and he was able to survive, and then slowly he's learning jiu-jitsu, and like now he's becoming like, he's getting good.
Right. Yeah. That's
like he'll be a pain for sure. But wrestlers, like they can walk in and they can hang for a while. I mean, there's a difference between wrestling and jiu-jitsu, but like,
for sure,
you combine the two, get a good wrestler and have him learn jiu-jitsu, and you got a dangerous guy.
It's the one thing that it definitely helps with is like your pressure. Because people who have never grappled before, like the idea of pressuring somebody is kind of foreign to them. And so, even when I first started, my wrestling, like it's funny because I couldn't tell how they could tell right away. Like I would just start rolling with someone, and as soon as we would start rolling, once we like the round ended or whatever, they were like, "You wrestled, didn't you?" I'm like, "Yeah." And they can just tell by the way like you hand fight, you grip fight, the pressure you apply, and stuff like that. And so I was always like, I'm not sure how. I'm like, I don't know how they can tell. I mean, I get pressure, like, I guess, but and until like I finally, I don't know, I was maybe training like 6 months or something like that, and there was a younger guy who had just started. I'm 44. I'll soon be 45, and he might be 21, 22, something like that. He comes in and he's like, "Hey, you want to catch a round?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And so we started rolling, and as soon as we locked horns, I could tell he wrestled. And I was like, oh man, some like 21-year-old kid that has a wrestling background. He's like 3 years removed from wrestling in high school. This is going to be rough.
Well, like there's just an attack and a forward pressure, like you said, like a go, not
and that's
not so much play it out and survive, and then
it's definitely, that's one of the definite hallmarks is wrestling. That was probably the biggest thing, I had to learn was, wrestling was always all gas, no break, and jiu-jitsu is like, you pick your moments when to throttle the gas, and it's all about efficiency of movement. You know what I mean? And so you got to kind of, use technique. And so you're not using strength. So you're not tiring yourself out and stuff like that. Cause very early on, you just get abused because you shoot your cardio like within the first like minute of a match. And you're like, and you look at this clock and you're like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. I got 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's funny though, because not to, to transition into deer hunting, it's like, I just find a lot of parallels, as far as, how jujitsu kind of matches up with hunting, just in terms of, like the patience of it. And especially when you're early, you do a lot of things out of effort. Right. And then as you kind of go in like your hunting journey, it becomes more, you make decisions out of efficiency, like where you're like, you work smarter and not harder. You know what I mean? Where it's like,
I can totally see that.
Yeah. Where it's like, you've done it so long, you start to see things and you see a map and you're like, okay, these are the 3 spots where it would be any good before you even walk into it. Where, 10 years ago, you might've had to walk that whole piece to find those 3 spots with, even while looking at a map, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
I could totally see that, because the jiu-jitsu, you learn a new level of patience and perseverance,
patience, perseverance, and when to, when to mash the gas and when to hang back. Cause I think, a lot of times, I know not this past season, but the season before, whenever I was, out in your neck of the woods hunting, in the plain states and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I made a couple critical mistakes just being overly aggressive. You know what I mean? Where, and it was because I just had never hunted that type of terrain before. And so I kind of calibrated those things, or recalibrated that this year, and got much closer, had better encounters, still didn't seal the deal, but like the hunts were better and productive, like more productive,
Right.
And it was just knowing when to be aggressive, knowing when to lay back and watch. And like anything, you only get that by doing it,
Right.
Yeah. But so how you what have you been up to in the whitetail woods, man? You been out doing any shed hunting, any scouting lately?
I've been walking a few times this winter. I just kind of go looking for sheds and just kind of go on some walks and learn some habitat, or walk through old habitat. Sometimes a new light bulb goes off, or you get a new idea, or see some things change, and so you might see something differently. But I've been out a few times this winter, and I take my dogs with me. They go on I just call them walkabouts. But we'll go walk, and I found 1 or 2 sheds, and
nice.
Kind of maybe piece together a couple new ideas on there's this one piece of property that I've walked, and I've walked it for like 2 or 3 winters now, but I've never like went and physically hunted it. But I've got all set up and ready mentally, and it's like one of these days when I go hunt it, I'll know it pretty well.
Right.
But I haven't tried it yet, but like next year, maybe I'll give it a try. But it's like I go walk out there because it's intriguing, but I haven't like physically set up a plan and tried to hunt it yet. But
right. I was going to ask, what's intriguing about the spot?
That is it's just kind of big, rolling, open, kind of brush oak type. It's pasture, but it's open. It's brush, kind of. I call it osage or not osage, but it's just like a brushy oak, and it doesn't have any water access, so I'm not going to get to float anywhere. So it's back to walking a long ways and all that stuff.
Right.
But it's just kind of big, and there's like 2 access points, and you kind of it's like uphill from either side. And I think that the sign is there. It shows me that, hey, there's been big deer that live around here. Like, you can tell that from rubs and whatnot.
Right.
But once I've walked around, it's like, man, they've really got a good advantage. I think they live up here on top of these points, and then they go from, it's like island, go from this island to Timber Style Island to that island. And then they kind of got the drop. So I think it would be quite a challenge to get out there and hunt one. But I think once you got up there and kind of got amongst them, and, have the right day during the rut, etc., like you could probably see some pretty cool stuff, I bet. And the surrounding property, north and south of private, it kind of looks like big, probably, maybe managed, hunted, type of ground. So like, it just has the ingredients that says there's probably some good bucks that live in there. And so I've walked it a lot. I haven't like found a physical antler or anything like that, but like I can
Right.
just, you can walk around and tell, yeah, there's some big ones that cruise through here, you know, and it's like, I
Right.
bet, you know. But
So what's keeping you from hunting it? Because it sounds like just from the walkabouts, it sounds like it's, you know, like it's showing you everything
you know, I
that
don't know.
that you
Like
need.
I've got a couple other places that have been like, you know, I've tried this or been reliable at that, and I really, you know, I love the canoe thing and trying to access stuff
Yeah.
like super sneaky, stealthy, and then like I've gotten where I hate walking long. It's not that I'm lazy. I'll walk like, you know, long distance or whatever, but I like being super sneaky. And sometimes I feel like when I just take off walking, it's like, yeah, they're gonna know I'm coming.
Yeah, I totally get that.
So,
Like I do prefer using water access too. Like not just. I mean, I love the
and
the sneaky
not
aspect
just
of it.
water. If I had like the perfect foot access, this is just like it's uphill and it's long ways in the dark both ways, and like they're just gonna know. You're just gonna have to get up, you could bump a few and get up there amongst them, I guess. And
Right.
but it'll probably be long days, and you'll see a couple deer all day long, probably. You know, like one early and one late or something.
Right.
I just haven't. You know, I hunted close to there. I was camped by there, and I hunted. You know, I hunted some places right around, but I haven't physically went up on that one spot yet. But
Right. Right.
that deer I killed the late season, we'll talk about it in a minute. It was not too far from that place.
Oh, really? Yeah. There's always a couple places every year that I never get to that I find, and I'm like, oh man, this would be a great spot.
Yeah,
And
well,
then-
I mean, you can get a ton of ideas, and then like it comes to season, like say 14 days, 2 weeks off or whatever. Like
that's right.
the wind only blows us so many directions in 2 weeks, and like if you're going to be here or there or there or there, then you didn't even make it to, you know,
Oh,
the other spots you had in mind, you know.
yeah. I would say in a given year, you know, I make it to less than. I probably only make it to like a third of the spots. Actually, hunt like a third of the spots that I have kind of outlined in a given season.
Yeah.
If that, I would say some seasons it's even less, and some of that is
Yeah.
work schedule, weather, wind related, you know, and if I know there's a decent deer in that area or not, you know, because if I don't think there's a good one in there, whether it's trail camera or whether it's sign or whatever the case is, then I just don't spend time there. You know, it's like
Right.
something has to tell me that I should be there. Now, sometimes I will find a brand new place and I may not know a whole lot about, and I might have a bad wind for some of my prime areas. And I'm like, I'm not going to go in there yet. It seems I'm probably like 2 weeks too early before that spot really is peak time to hunt that spot. And so
Yeah.
even if it's not a great wind for the new spot, I might just go hunt it anyway to see what the wind does there. You know what I mean? To make sure
Right.
it's like, yeah, so when I get an east wind, I know it's going to blow east, or hey, in the morning when the thermal's rising, you get an east wind. If it's not 7 mile per hour or better, like, you know, the thermal's really going to affect my wind direction in that spot. Or just so I kind of start to get a little bit of intel about it. So that way, when I do have a good deer that I know is in that area, that the first time I'm hunting it isn't when I'm still trying to figure out what the wind and like, you know, my access and all that stuff, you know? So how much do you do that, or most of your hunts pretty well dialed and strategic?
I mean, like a lot of my, you know, in the past few years, it's like I feel pretty safe. Like if it's like I'm gonna go, you know, float in here and access it like this, the wind needs to be like that, and it's kind of like a no-brainer. Like, you know, the wind needs to be out the east. It's blowing back across the creek, and the deer are gonna walk, you know, north and south or something.
Right.
But that's, you know. And I've heard it from other people, you know, and I may try to get the wind too far, like in my favor, like where it's like totally in my favor. And a lot of times when the wind is, you know, like say if it was that same tree where I'm saying it needs to be east, I realized that I can actually sit there when it's out south because that bank sticks out just enough that like the wind will blow right up the edge of the bank, and that kind of gives the deer like that gives him 90% favor, you know, and me like 10%, and
Right.
and you know they feel safer traveling like that, you know, rather than when it's just totally against their nose. So
Yeah.
I think that plays a key into it a little bit. But
For sure. So when do you have like I'm always late to the game, man. Like I feel like every year I'm behind the 8 ball, and some of it's weather related because the one piece in the north, I like to big woods piece I've been scouting and trying to hunt the past 2 years. It stays under snow, longer. And so it just takes me longer to get up there. But when do you like to have is there like a date you like to have all your scouting done by, or do you just kind of do it all, all winter, spring, summer long, or do you have like a cutoff point where you're like, I like to have everything done by like April 1st or by the time turkey season comes in or whatever the case is?
I mean, if preferably I just like to go do all my walking in the winter. I mean, January, February, March. And when, turkey season comes here, like I'm really interested in trying to kill those things. And so I'll get out there and just like, if I'm normally not in any places that I'm deer hunting when I'm turkey hunting, so that doesn't do me any good.
Oh, really? Okay.
I haven't been, so we'll go to like Missouri or something and go to some other places and go. And what's funny is I got a place up in Missouri that I need to go deer hunting. Like I can go turkey hunt it, but I've never went up there to deer hunt it. And so, I need to take advantage of that probably.
Yeah.
But, and so I like to do all my walking in the winter, mainly, and get off some new ideas and old ideas and go walking and go look at Google Earth and go walking and go look at Google Earth some more and try to come up with, just a new idea really that I think that'll work, or nobody's probably thought of that yet, maybe.
Right.
And hope that next year, because like you can make all the plans in the world, and then like it's amazing how quick they can all blow up. Like in 2 days, once everybody shows up, and it's like, oh well, what do I do now?
Yeah, ain't that the truth, man? That seems like almost, I don't know. It seems like that's almost every season for me, at least.
That's the bummer part, is like you can really do some good scouting and find some good stuff and make some excellent plans, but there's that uncontrolled variable of what happens once everybody shows up.
Yeah, there's that, and I almost feel like sometimes I do better hunting out. It's funny, my buddy makes fun of me for this too, because he's like, you do better when you go somewhere and you don't know anything. He's like, when you just get there and you just try to figure it out on the fly and you have like 5 days, he's like, man, you're always into deer within like a couple days, Yeah. He's like, at home, he's like, I feel like you outthink yourself too much. He's like, it's like, know the spots so well, that you're just overanalyzing and kind of trying to outsmart yourself as opposed to just doing what you do when you travel. He's like, he's like, you've proven over and over that give you a couple of days, you'll find where good deer are at. He's like, at home, he's like, you spend all off season kind of dialing stuff in. And then whenever those things don't work out, not that I'm reluctant to change, but I'm so kind of committed to some areas.
Yeah, you're committed to this thing that you've thought about all year and planned on. And,
And I know in my mind, I'm like, man, I should just abandon this. But I'm like, no, I know there's a good deer in here, and I've seen it 3 years in a row. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, I just need to time it right. I just need the weather, and I need the wind. I need all these things to kind of line up, and it'll be good, But, and I mean, I can't complain. In the past couple of years, it's like it has played out well in one particular spot. I just have yet to get an arrow off in that spot. I've seen my target deer 2 years in a row in the same spot, on the same date, on the same spot, same date in 2 years, or 2 years straight.
Yeah.
And just can't get an arrow off for, a couple different reasons, but regardless, it's just a tricky spot to hunt. And that's why they're in there, to be honest. You know what I mean? It's like, that was the appeal of the place. I was like, I know they're in here. All the sign is here. The inventory is here. The encounters are here. And the reason why they're in here is because, man, they're really hard to kill in this spot.
Right.
But, so man, I know last year, so we'll go to 2021, I think it was right after I got back from Kansas, or maybe I was just leaving Kansas or something like that. And I got a text from you, and it was a little bit, you had a little bit of a different season. I guess you would say there were some things that came up, that you needed to take care of and needed to be present for, and things just kind of worked out, where you were at the right place almost at the wrong time.
Right place at the right time.
Yeah, right place at the right time for a situation that, would prefer not to kind of unfold, but did. And
definitely.
And then it was crazy because, like, you kind of sent me a text saying, hey, this is how my seasons went. Hope you're doing well. How's Kansas? You're just checking in,
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, you told me what kind of happened. I was like, oh man, that stinks, and well, that certainly stinks. And then, the part that, you may not get much more hunting in and stuff like that. I was like, that's a real bummer, but at least you were where you needed to be. And then sure enough, lo and behold, I get a text not too long after that where, you started filling some tags in very short order.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about the 2021 season, man. Cause it was kind of wild.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, coming into, 2021, I'd have to think back to 2020. I had killed a good deer or two in 2020. So I'm always looking forward to deer season and was ready and prepared. And I felt pretty prepared that year. I'd had, stuff in good order and was looking forward to. I normally take like a 2-week, time off and just go sit in the woods and go hunt, and it would come up to that time of year. It was like it's November 6th, I believe, which was a Saturday. And I drove up Friday evening and I was going to hunt Saturday morning. And then I was already planning to come back Saturday evening. I had a girlfriend at the time, and it was her birthday. So I was coming back to take her out to dinner and be a good guy and do all that stuff.
Right.
And, which normally, like, I just go and, but I came back. And so I was coming back. Actually, I just got back to town and I was like on the way to, get some flowers and stuff like that. But, and then my daughter had called and I'll have to tell a little bit of a backstory after this, I guess. But, she called me and she was like, "Hey, Dad," she's like, I'll probably get upset.
Right.
But she's like, "Hey, I broke my leg again." And when I say again, I guess this is where 2 years before this, she was playing softball and she had a collision in the outfield and she broke her left tibia and fibia, her shin bone.
Oh, dang.
And she broke them both. Just snapped them right in the middle. And so she went through 3 surgeries. She had a surgery to put plates in, and then she had a staph infection, and then she had another surgery to get the plate taken back out.
Right.
Everything was good. She, I didn't understand the severity of that, but
right.
She could have lost her leg and then, or worse, so.
Yeah. Staph infections are can be tricky for sure.
Yeah. And it was down at the bone and it was on the, so it was like, they were like, they had to go in immediately and clean it up.
Yeah.
And so that was 2 years ago. Like she had been through a really traumatic deal a couple years ago, breaking her left shin bone.
Right. Right.
And so anyways, like we made it through that. She did. And so anyways, this date rolls around about 2 years later or whatever. And then she calls and she's like, "Dad," she's like, don't be mad. And yeah, she's like, "Dad, don't be mad." She's like, "But I broke my leg again." And I just lost, I was like,
yeah.
What? I was like, what happened? What are you doing? Like, where are you at? And she was like, "I'm okay." She's like, and she was talking fine. She's like, "I was riding a skateboard and anyways, she went down this hill and went too fast and came off of it and just like snapped her ankle, the same leg, the same tibia and fibia, but like about down at the ankle,
Right.
And so but she just tore it up, and so, but I was literally getting off at the exit of the highway, and which that highway would have led me to the next town over, which was where the hospital was going to be,
Right.
And so like, I should have been in a tree 2.5 hours away, but like, because of plan A, I was back here and then that happened. And so like, I just, instead of turning right, I turned left, and I actually made it to the hospital like before she did. And she was like 2 miles from the hospital, And so like the people that house they were at, like they had put her in her car and in their car and got her to the hospital. So I was there to help like get her out, all that stuff. And then, yeah, so she had just broke her ankle, fib, fractured it, like, and so, that was that. Like, once that happens, you just have to stop and take care of business,
Yeah, you got to take care of family at that point. You got to go into dad mode and be a dad, right?
Yeah, your dad at that point, and in which dad, you can't do anything, so you're helpless dad at that point. So.
that is the worst. Yeah.
But and so and so that happened on the 6th, and I think we got to come home that night. But then I think we had to sit at home for like a week before she got to have a surgery. It was like 7 days or something. And so, we just sit here. I just, help take care of her like you do somebody that's hurt.
Yep.
And, all my stuff was still up there, my camper, all my stuff and all that. And my brother was out hunting. So I was getting to, live that through him and a couple other buddies that were just out and about. And, I don't know, 8 or 10 days into it, I got enough time where I could go get my camper and break camp back down, and I brought it back home or whatever, and was just planning on taking care of her. She had her surgery and going into rehab, which that's a rough deal. Yeah. And it was about the 19th or the 20th. I don't remember the date exactly, but she was starting to do better, make it a little longer, be a little more comfortable. And so I'd asked my mom, I was like, hey, do you think you could come over and sit with her for like half a day? Maybe I could go out for the evening or something. And, my mom always around to help. So,
yep.
She came over, and I think I left at about 10 a.m. and, it was about an hour drive and unload and, paddle. And so I was in the tree by like noon.
And so this was Oklahoma. This was Oklahoma, right?
Yeah, this was Oklahoma. It was just about, so I was like, I'm just going to go out for the evening and just try to clear my head a little bit.
Yeah.
And I wasn't expecting anything or really wanting anything. It's just to get out and participate, really.
Yeah.
And so, I was in the tree by about noon, and about 3:45. I'd seen several different deer, some small bucks and little does coming and going, but things were kind of starting to get up and feed for the evening and move around. And I'd heard a grunt and turned and seen this, buck, and I know he wasn't like a monster buck. Like, considering the circumstances, I was like, yeah, that's a gorgeous deer. Like, I'm happy to be here. So
yeah,
I'll try this. And, he walked up to 30 yards, and I was like, man, just make a good shot. And so I shot, made a good shot. He ran about 20 yards and fell over. And I was like, wow, I can't believe that it's happened, And,
right.
And so that was really exciting. But I was like, on that one, I remember like being really excited to bring that one home, because I knew Easton she'd be proud of me and would be happy that, I was able to get out and do that,
Right.
And so I was able to do that, bring it home. She was super excited, and we had some good times with that. And
what was it about the spot that you went to that particular area? Was it did it just happen to be the closest that, the spot, like one of your hunting spots that was close because you wanted to get there and be able to get back quick? Or
yeah, it was just it was the closest spot. It was the closest spot that I had like some decent confidence in, that I hadn't obviously got to hunt it at all.
Right.
And I think it was, I want to say the 19th. It was like the day before our rifle season starts. So I was like, there's a slim chance, right before this starts. And the wind happened to be right, and the flow, the access and the wind and all that was correct to go to that place. And then it was just like, right before rifle, usually right before rifle is like a really good time of year and day to get a shot at one, okay, around here. But it's like November, like 19th, middle of the rut, basically, before everybody gets out there. But and so it's just kind of those scenarios. As mainly, the wind was going to be right. It's a decent tree, a decent spot. It's kind of a funnel along a creek in the ridge where they kind of, if they're going to come through there, there's a good chance they're going to come
through that spot, through that area,
through that spot or whatever.
Right.
And so it was just like, that's probably my best bet to encounter anything or see anything on one evening outing,
Right. And when you sent me that text, I was stoked. Well, cause I knew what you were kind of going through beyond that or whatever. So I was just glad, what the text told me was, one, things were going well enough that you're able to get away. So I was glad to hear that. And two, I was just glad you were able to get out, which is nice. And you know what beyond those two things, you know what my first thought was when I read that was, I said to myself, I was like, that sounds like a Travis Keith hunt right there. 4 hours and the deal is sealed.
Yeah. I mean, I can't make that stuff up. It's definitely like, I have some crazy things happen. Like I have so many crazy stories like that.
Well, you do, but the thing that always gets me with you, man, and I know we've only known each other, a year or two and texting and talking and stuff like that,
right.
But, is that your spots, your areas are so dialed that it doesn't surprise me whenever you go and you hunt for 4 hours and you kill something. Like some guys, like if they told me they went into the woods and they killed something for 4 hours, like, man, you'll never do that again. You know what I mean? Like, or, not a good chance that that'll happen again. But with you, it's like, if you did that and then like the following year you did it again and the following year you did it again, like I wouldn't be surprised. I'd be like, yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
Like his spots are so dialed in, like he knows where he needs to be and he just goes to that spot or goes to the right spot and he sets up and he kills a deer in like 4 hours and he goes home. Like,
yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. I get surprised every time. I'm like, I think this will work, but then when it does, I'm like, I can't believe that worked.
That's awesome.
And each year when the 8th year rolls around, I'm like starting at the bottom of the barrel again. I'm like, there's no way that can happen again. And I'll look around or think about how many times it's happened, and I'm like, yeah, there's no way that can really happen again, but it does eventually. So
right. Yeah, exactly. Well, so then like to top that off, so it's, not funny again, I guess ironic, I guess is the right word to use, was that, there was like a moment where we were like, man, I probably am not even going to get out. And again, glad to hear that your daughter was like on the mend and things were going well and stuff like that. And then you went from that to like, all right, I killed a buck in Oklahoma. And then it's like, well, not to be outdone, I'm going to go ahead and just, extend this party to Kansas too.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm like, it's chicken killing dog. I mean, once you get started, like then you really get started.
I don't know that I've ever heard that before, but that might be one of my favorite phrases. I'm like a chicken killing dog. Like it's funny because
like when you get a turkey and it's like, okay, I got to go get another one.
Well,
now. Like,
the funny thing is like I had a dog growing up. Like we didn't have chickens. We raised turkeys. My dad did. And we had a dog that liked to kill the turkeys. So like when you say chicken killing dog, like it made me think of whenever I was a little kid and we had these turkeys and the dog would try to kill the turkeys. Yeah, so it brought back a very vivid picture for me.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Well, I mean,
so anyway,
another way of saying like, man, once that happened, that it's like that just lights the fire, a passion again. And it's like, golly, I can't believe like the things I get to see sometimes or get to experience just like getting out there. And then, it ain't me. It's just, I put myself out there and like some, awesome stuff happens a lot of times. And so, that kind of ignited that. And, I come home and I sit here for a couple more days and I'm hearing what's going on out there, all these stories of bucks running around and the weather, and it's just like, I want to be back out there. And I'm looking at Google Earth and thinking about my spots that are ready to be set in that have like no human to go set in them,
Right.
And Easton was doing good, and I'd actually, and I had a Kansas tag in my pocket, and I told my mom, I'm like, well, maybe I can try to go up there for like a day, like go up and maybe you can stay the night and I can get up early and drive up there and then like do like hang my stand and hunt in it and then come back. And she's like, yeah, I can do that.
Right.
And I'd looked at this one spot, which I hadn't physically hunted it. It was a spot that me and my dog Bubba had walked that previous January. I have a cool picture. I think it was January 17th or something. Mm-hmm. Which we had walked a new spot in the winter, and I found a good rub along the creek, and I was like, okay, yep, nice buck lives here, and I can put it in here and float that way, and wind needs to be like this, and I'll come back next November, And so that's basically what I'd done. I'd been back one, like in September, and kind of got familiar with how to get in and out in the tree and that stuff, and so after September, I hadn't been back since then, and so. It was like, and while I'm sitting here at home, you know, with Easton, I was looking at Google Earth, and I was looking, and I'm like, man, which day can I go hunt? And I was like, okay, no, November 23rd was the day I got to go. And I was looking, and I was like, it's supposed to be kind of a south wind. And this is that scenario I mentioned earlier, because you know, no brainer it was just an east wind. The creek is kind of running north-southish, and an east wind's going to blow it back across the creek, and I can sit there and nothing will smell me. But on that day, the wind was going to be like southerly, you know, and but it's kind of an oxbow there. And I was looking on Google Earth, and I was like, well, I'm kind of out on the edge of that. I was like, that's going to blow it right up the edge of the bank, kind of, and I might get away with that. And it's going to be worth risking it on November 23rd, this late, you know, going into late rut. Like, they're going to be moving if they're moving, and I'm going to be there. I only get one chance anyway, so I might as well go give it a try.
Right.
And so that's what I did. She stayed the night, and I got up early and drove up there and got myself put in, and had got settled in the tree, you know, about a little before daylight, probably about daylight, I guess, gray, you know. I think it was I sat there till like 11. I'd seen a couple other, 2 small bucks and maybe a doe or something. And then it was about 11, I believe. And those two small bucks had found a doe, and they had like started harassing her, like seriously chasing her like bad, you know, causing some commotion through the woods.
Right.
And they had come blazing back through there, and was just really making a lot of noise. And I was like, I'm going to rattle one. So I was like, because I don't think a big buck is going to like go for this, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And so I kind of just rattled lightly a little bit. And from the downwind direction, which my wind was kind of just going up the bank, I heard something coming, and I caught a glimpse, and I was like, oh, that's a good deer. And he was coming to check out what all that noise was, and then whose antlers, you know, clashed.
Right.
And he comes sneaking in that little meadow with the cedars, and I had to kind of crouch down and make a hole and make a shot and make it all happen real quick. And I wasn't even sure what he was when he walked up. I could tell he was broken, and I thought he was like an 8 or something, but I could tell something was broken on him. But he walked up, and I got a shot off, and he took off, just like the deer, like the year before. He took off about 50 yards, and then he stopped, and he stood there. He flickered his tail, and then eventually they walk off slowly and calmly. And I was like, I shot that deer in the liver, you know, because I have plenty of experience doing that.
Right.
And
I know, right?
I was like, that was liver.
We talked about that on the last episode. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was like, I think that was liver. And so I didn't even get down for 1 hour. I just sat up there for 1 hour, and then I got down, and it's like maybe 25 yards over to the arrow, and this habitat was like, it's an oxbow, it's real thick, like cedary, and so like you can bend down on your knees and like you can see long ways, you know, like.
Right. Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
They had an advantage, like seriously, if they were in there or laying down in there or something. And so like I got down out of the tree, and then I just kind of like, I crawled over to my arrow. I didn't even walk over there, because like they had such a visual advantage if he was around there. And so I crawled over to it, and I looked at it. It was like covered, dark red blood. I saw drip, 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 drip. And I'm like, yep, that's liver. I was like, I need to wait longer. And so I go back to the canoe, and then I just go float around for like another hour. I go paddle up the creek and stress out down there for a little while, and paddle back and kind of stressed out down here for a little while.
Right. Just walking,
you know,
just paddling your stress around is all.
Yeah. Just getting it out. And then you know, in the back of my mind, I'm like, I got a daughter that's at home that's laying there with a broken leg. And it's like, I don't need to get into like a seriously like all day, you know, adventure. But,
right.
So anyway, so I was like, I need to give them time, because my experiences have shown a liver shot deer can live a long time. And you leave them alone, they might go lay down and get sick enough to die, or where they can't move, you know, nearly as good. But
right.
So I was only able to wait about 2 hours. I would normally probably wait a lot longer than that.
Right.
But I go back in and I just start crawling. I go back to the arrow and I never stood up once. I just crawled from drop to drop. And then I would look and glass and look, and I'd crawl to the next drop and, you know, kind of look under it's like a canopy under the cedars, you know?
Yeah.
But you're like 2-3 feet tall, so canopy. And I'd crawl, and I could tell he was just steady bleeding and then kind of meandering a little bit. And I'd probably made it about 150 yards. And I caught a glimpse of something moving up through there and got to looking, and it was him. And he was laying there, you know, next to the cedar tree, and he was panting, and he was still alive, but he was, you know, he was sick.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so thick in there was nothing I could really do. So I just kind of sat back and waited, and it took about 30 more minutes, and he eventually expired on his own.
Wow.
But if I would have walked in there at all, like,
totally would have blew him out.
I think I would have jumped him up and he would have ran, and like, I have no idea what would have happened at that point.
Yeah, you would have been on a voyage like the last one. Is what would happen there?
Yeah,
you know
like
what I mean?
like normally I'd have been on one of my normal deals, but
Right.
But I felt really good about, you know, how I approached that one, and going back to, you know, just crawling and recognizing how he, you know, when he left, recognizing that, and then kind of knowing a few of the things that I've been through before. It's like, man, you don't want to run them off. But.
Right. So how long from the time that you got into that tree, you know, you kayaked in, I'm assuming you kayaked in the morning, right?
Right.
Yeah. So how long were you in that tree before you killed that deer?
It was about 11 o'clock in the morning. So, I mean, like, if I got in the tree, you know, at daylight or whatever, till about 11.
Right. So you had about a total of 8 hours of hunting time in for those $2.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
that's
that was
crazy,
that was
man.
crazy.
That's
you
crazy.
know, and which normally it's the opposite of that. Like, I usually go and I spend a lot of time sitting like daylight till dark, and you know,
right.
I'll hunt a lot and a lot of hours, and then it'll happen. And that time is like, there wasn't a lot of hours involved, you know, and there wasn't hardly any hours in the hunting part, but
right.
But you know, and there was a phrase I'd heard. It was the summer before. I think I was doing some running and listening to some stuff. It's a phrase I'd heard, and they said, "Delayed is not denied."
Yeah, you texted me that, dude, and I love that phrase. It's such a good phrase.
Yeah, and that kind of summed up, you know, after that happened, it was just like, that kind of hit me, you know, that from the summer it came back, and it was just like, you know, I sat at home patiently. I didn't have to sit in a tree patiently day to day, but I sat at home patiently.
Well, I mean, that phrase is just a good life lesson phrase too. Delayed isn't denied. I mean, you can apply that to anything. You know what I mean? And that's,
it is. I mean, you know,
I think of, like, you know, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning is jujitsu, right? It's, you know, it's certainly in my journey to this point, you know, gratification is delayed because it's like, you're just never, especially early, you get beat a lot by everybody, you know? And so that gratification, you know, is certainly delayed, but it doesn't mean you'll be denied, because you get increments of like gratification every now and then when you do something right. It's like a small moment, right, of that. And I think it's just important that, you know, I mean, you can learn those life lessons a lot of ways. Some people learn them with jujitsu, some people learn them through hunting, you know what I mean? Or realize them, or actualize them, you know, in different ways. And, you know, I think it's awesome that you were able to kind of look back on that and recognize that there was a lesson there, right? Like, and that's the one thing.
Oh yeah.
That's the one thing I always appreciate talking to you is, like, there's always, you're very kind of tuned into like what the moment is giving you. And that's something I think that's lost on a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. If I were to, try to sum myself up to somebody, or to each deer, each hunt, like, I think there's a lesson at each one. And, you know, I learned this from that one, or this from that one, or something.
Yeah.
And there's always something you can take away from it. And then, you know, just giving credit where it's due, where my faith is, where I believe these things come from, who made them, who controls them. And it's like, you know, if you know.
Yeah. 100%.
That's just kind of my journey of it. You know, and kind of the delayed isn't denied. That's, you know, where that comes from. It comes out of the Bible, and you know, just trying to work hard and have good faith, and like good things happen. And
when you do
that's where a lot of my stories come from. I have some super good ones. So
yeah, I mean, you do the right things, and you know, you manifest the outcomes. You're rewarded for that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And that's what I love about talking to you and getting the stories, because there's always a component of it that is that there's a deeper meaning than just the deer. You know what I mean. And that's what I enjoy.
That's, I think, my deeper connection to it. It's like, it's not just deer, but it's life lessons, and you know, hopefully I can share them with somebody, and maybe it clicks with them too someday. You know.
Yeah.
So and it doesn't have to be hunting. It can be like in anything.
That's
you know?
it. So that's it, man. That's it, dude.
Just
I mean, if
try to be a good example, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and that same phrase that rolls right into the next season.
Right. So it totally does. It's funny because it's like it was like,
that's just how I roll.
It was like your 2-year mantra. You know what I mean? It was because we go to 2022, and you know, I was back from Kansas. This is like December. You end up killing a good buck in late December. I want to get to, well, let me ask you this, because you ended up having a killer encounter in Oklahoma. Which one happened first? I'm assuming the Oklahoma encounter. Okay.
Yeah.
But I want to end on that one. So let's talk about that Kansas hunt, because this was
the Kansas one. So,
yeah, because again, it was late December. Delayed isn't denied. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, you know, you're pushing your chips toward the end. You're like riding right into late season to get it done on this deer. So how did that whole thing play out?
You know, it goes back to the middle of November. You know, my 2-week outing, I took off to go hunt. I tried to hunt both spots, not, you know, simultaneously, but like sometimes I might be hunting up in Kansas, and the next day I may drive down and be hunting in Oklahoma. My brother was in Oklahoma, and you know, I was hunting in Kansas little couple days here, and then I'd go down and spend a couple days with him, and then I'd go back a couple days here and a couple days there, and I kind of did that for a week. And I had an encounter, and I wasn't having any luck hardly. Like I set 7 days. This is how the beginning of my year or my season started. I set 7 days in 7 different places, and like they were all excellent. Like I felt really good about them. You know, if it's Oklahoma or Kansas, I'm like, man, I feel good about this. But like, I just wasn't seeing it. I wasn't seeing the deer. I wasn't seeing the animals, the sign, nothing. You know, like I thought, and I would hear other people's stories, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I don't even know what I'm doing, but like, I'm pretty sure I know how to do this, but this isn't working, you know?
Right.
So I did that for probably a week. And then, there was one morning in Kansas, I had an encounter with a pretty good deer, not a big like Kansas deer, but it was you know, it was like a 140 type deer. And the best thing I can say is I flung an arrow at him. Like I didn't even come close to him.
Right.
And so like that had happened, and I was kind of frustrated with that. And then I'd go back to, you know, hunt around my brother a little bit, and they were having some good action. And so about November 14th, and I don't know what caused me to do this, honestly. Like I was in a tree November 14th at 8 a.m. in Kansas in a good spot, and I felt good about it. And the weather was good. I mean, I'd missed this deer like a few days before, but like I didn't spook him off. I didn't even scare him like that bad. So, and I don't know, like I was beating myself up mentally. Like I'm my own worst critic, and so I'm usually at odds with myself. Am I doing this right, or have I done something wrong? Like, why isn't this working? You know? And,
right.
And I sat there and I thought, well, I was like, that shot you had, I was like, that was your chance. You know, I talked myself into it. I was like, that was your chance right there. Like, you just need to go, you know, go down to Oklahoma and hunt with your brother and have a good time. And, you know, like, if you get to come back, fine. If you don't, fine. Like, you had your chance. Like, I will be a terrible critic, terribly hard on myself.
I do the same thing. If I screw something up, it's like I get into the tank where I'm like, that was probably the only time I'm going to have an opportunity. This, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, I'll make myself pay for it too. Like I'll be like, you you did this, like, here's where you got to do this now. It's like, so, and so I sat there and I was just kind of, I guess, unhappy about the whole deal. And I, like I said, middle of this perfect morning day. And I'm like, you know what? You just need to get the heck out of this state and don't come back if you can't do any better than that, And so I did. Like, I climbed down, I grabbed my crap, and I went and hooked onto my camper, and I took off, and I just went down to Oklahoma. And I was like, all right, bro, I was like, I'm down here to hunt with you guys, for now. So, I did that. I just kind of moved camp over to Oklahoma, which I got to hunt that evening, which it was like a weird snow came in, which like it doesn't do that much here. So I got to hunt in this weird snow, kind of evening slushy and all that. And the next day was the 15th, which happened to be my dad's birthday. And I was sitting in one of my old faithful kind of spots where I've shot a deer before, and was kind of reminiscing on that. And it was white, it was snow, and it was like gorgeous. I never get to see that habitat like that. And it was like this crystal and calm and snowy, and, along this river and all this stuff. And it had a decent buck, walk up underneath me, and I thought he was an 8-pointer, and I was like, oh yeah, that'll work, So I shot that deer and was able to, have a good, basically morning, kind of taking some good pictures and breaking them down on the river and just doing that whole thing. And like, it's cool because I got him back across the river, and I, set a tarp up and took good pictures and broke him down. And about the time I was done loading him up, the snow was all gone. Huh. And it was like that scenery had just kind of been laid for me, and I had showed up, and I felt like I had kind of listened, to my conscience, my spirit, and it was like, you need to just go do something else,
Yeah.
And the next morning, like, I had this really pretty encounter, and it was like, it wasn't the biggest antlered buck, but it was like, I made a good shot on him, and it was the scenery though. It was just beautiful. And then like at the exact time I was done, like I remember I picked the meat up and picked his head up and got it in the truck, and I looked back across, and what was white was all brown again, and it was completely different. And like nobody else got to see it but me that day.
That's cool.
And that was really cool. And it was, like I said, my dad's birthday and stuff like that. But and so
so did
I think I got off track.
That's all right. So that went down.
So I killed that deer. Yeah.
Did you Did you head back to Kansas then after that?
I didn't. I was like, no. I was like, I had the tag, and I was like, no. It's like you screwed up, so you got to stay out of there. Like you had your chance.
Right.
I was like, you have another tag in Oklahoma, and your brother's here. Like, just keep hunting with him and see what you can do. Try to kill a good deer down here. Like, you killed a deer, but try to kill a good one, like you always try to do. And
right.
Just try to see what happens. And my brother, he was having some good hunts, some good encounters, and we had made buddies with a couple of guys at a camp by us, which, like, I'm normally like a loner, and I don't camp around the campground and stuff like that. My brother, he's pretty social, so
right.
we had made buddies with a guy named Kenny and David and from South Carolina, and this other guy named Travis from Wisconsin, I believe, way up north. So they were cool guys. We happened to kind of have camaraderie around the camp when we would come back, and
nice.
And so I stayed there hunting around Oklahoma, and I tried and ended up, not getting another shot. And so season winds down into November. I hadn't gone back, to Kansas anymore. And so into December has rolled around, and we're having like the really cold, frigid cold front that came through. It was like 4 degrees and 0 degrees and stuff like that.
Yeah, I remember that front because my buddy was holding an Iowa tag, and he was supposed to go back to Iowa during that time because he was out in Iowa during the rut and had a giant deer that he had seen visually, filmed it. It was like a 190-inch deer, and he was trying to go back, sometime late season to hunt him, and that cold front popped through right around the holidays, and he just couldn't. He lives in Ohio, so he just couldn't get away that time, because of he's got little kids and stuff like that, and so it just was bad timing for the front because he couldn't get away during that time, and it was
right.
It was a shame because giant deer out there, and that cold front was just
giant deer.
Yeah, it was just like primo, perfect timing of the cold front outside of the dates. If it would have been like 4 or 5 days after Christmas or 4 or 5, you know what I mean? Like he would have been in a lot better spot. But anyway, so you got that front that had been rolling through there in December.
Yeah, so it was frigid down here. I had never, really hunted. I mean, I've hunted, but like I'm not been successful hunting late season. I don't have like a plan and anything that I'm like, okay, well, anything I'm good at,
Right.
And I remember I'd actually called Eddie a couple of days before that, and I was like, hey, how do I go about finding one of these deer on this cold weather stuff? I hear they get up and they feed a lot and like, all that. It's like, is that true, basically?
Right.
And Eddie, he's like, well, you just got to get out there and get after it, go find you a wheat field or something.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, all right, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Go find a food source, so
right.
it was frigid one day and I was off. I think I was off work and I was like, well, I'm just going to go drive around and like, see if I can learn something, like see if I can figure this out. Are they on their feet when it's this cold? Like, is it what they tell me, And so I drove up to Kansas and drove around one piece of public, and I spotted 2 does here and 2 does there and 2 does over there maybe. And I was trying to figure out what was going on, and it was stinking cold. And I was like, well, I'll drive up to this other place and go drive around that and see what's going on up there. And I was like, there's a wheat field up there, and maybe there's something on that. And I drove up there and drove by that wheat field, and I didn't like stop. I just kind of like drove by it, and I didn't really notice anything, but I'd seen bunches of other deer, out and about and on their feet, and so I kind of went to this third spot, and I ran into like a whole bunch of deer crossing the road that were kind of headed towards that piece of public, and I had not hunted it. I scouted it, but I hadn't hunted it. So I'd walk, like, well, I'll go walk off in there and see what's going on, and went in there and spotted some deer, spotted some deer from a distance. They were up and feeding and active and doing like what you hear about. I didn't see any big bucks down there. I was like, well, I'm going to, just like make a practice stalk attempt, like, and see if I can even get close to these things, like in the snow and
right,
all this clothes and all that stuff. So I did like a, stalk attempt, and I got within bow range, like of the deer, but they just wasn't like a big one or anything. And I was like, well, that was pretty fun. So back to the car and back to driving around, and I drove back by that wheat field again, and I spotted some turkeys like way out there at the tree line on the other side of it. So I stopped long enough to raise my binoculars to look at the turkeys, and then I noticed a buck that had ran off. Like when a vehicle stops on a road, like they usually take off running in it. So that's why I didn't really stop the first time, but I didn't see anything either. So, but I noticed the turkeys. I stopped, and then I noticed the buck running off, and I was like, well, there's a deer down there. It's like that, and I started putting 2 and 2 together, and there was a big drainage ditch that had kind of dissected that wheat field that headed right down towards where all of those animals were. And I'd already drove by it, and I was like, then it clicked. I was like, that water is frozen solid. That ditch is like 10 feet tall. You can get in that ditch and you can walk all the way down there right to those animals, and then just kind of see what's down there. And so that was my plan. I drove back around and parked and just got in that ditch and just walked on top of the ice, basically like all the way down there. And like once you get down there, you can pop out, find the turkeys, and then you should be able to find the deer. So that's basically what happened. And got down there, spotted some deer, and then I spotted a pretty nice buck. I was like, man, that's a nice looking deer. I need to get a little bit closer. So like I'm sneaking. It got about as close as I could. I was about 100 yards probably. And then I just kind of got to this tree. I hadn't had to wait too long at all. And this doe, she starts walking kind of my direction, and the wind is kind of from my right to left. And if she gets even with my left, she'll smell me, but they're coming, from in front of me still. So,
right.
But she's walking out there, and then I noticed this good buck is kind of following her, and I'm like, dang, he's he's going to follow her out here. And I kind of range find her, and she's at like 50 yards. And I'm like, this is actually going to happen. You know, he's going to walk out here, but it's not going to be close. I was like, it's going to be like 50 yards.
Right.
And well, he's a little bit farther than her. So like, it's like 55 yards, you know, and I shoot, when I practice in my yard, I shoot 50. Like I have a 50-yard pin. That's my farthest pin. But I shoot in my yard a lot, 50, and I can hit it pretty good. But all those clothes and all that stressful situation is totally different. Shooting at a deer is not like shooting. It's not like shooting in the yard.
Yep.
So
totally.
But I was knelt down, you know, next to this tree, and I'm like, okay, he's like 50, 53. I'm gonna give it 55 or so. I'm gonna hold my 50 high. And so like I get drawn back, and she nails me. She sees me draw back, and she's just staring at me. And he had his head down and wasn't noticing. And I kind of aim, and then he steps, and he's like straight away. And then like he's kind of like I'm at full draw for way too long. And it just felt weird. And my quiver was hitting the tree, and I'm like, man, this just doesn't feel right. And I remember thinking in my head, like, you do this in, like, you can drive nails in your yard. Like, you shoot this shot all the time, all summer. And so he got broadside, and I just kind of held good form and pulled good. And I was like, man, God, I was like, guide this arrow. And I just let it fly. And I heard it whack. He turned to run, and I kind of saw the arrow, you know, fly, kind of, it was an optical illusion. It looked like the arrow hit him and bounced straight back out. Like when you hit a target and you hit a soft spot and it bounces out.
Right.
Like, that's what my eyes saw, but it was the arrow passing through him. It was the arrow leaving on the other side. It was just slowed down a lot, you know?
Right.
And so anyways, but I shoot and I hear it whack and I see the arrow, what I think like pokes in and bounces out. And I was like, and he wheels and runs off, and I hear something crash, you know, off in the woods. He makes it off the field to the corner of the woods, and I hear something crash over there. But I see other deer leave, and I see a good buck leave, and I'm like, well, he crashed and then got back up, and you know, there'll be some sign over there. I can start over there.
Right.
And so I was like, but I'm just going to sit here a little bit and let everything calm down. And so I sat there like 5 or 10 minutes trying to calm myself down. And I look over there in that corner, and I see like something moving, and I see a buck, you know, like it's not him, it's a different one. And it's a bigger one. Like it was considerably bigger. Like it's a nice buck.
Right.
And he's standing in that corner. He walks over there and he stands, and he steps out into the field, like the corner of the field, like as like say you were to just look my direction. Like it was like he walked out there and just stared, and he was like, why did you do that?
Right.
You know, like, and he was just a big, majestic, wide, like 11-point buck.
Dang.
And then he turned back around and he went back to the corner, and he stood there for like 15 minutes. And then he slowly was working his way off. And so once he started working his way off, I eased my way down there and kind of bumped him, and he went on. And so I walk out there to get my arrow, and I find my arrow, and it was kind of covered in blood, and there was some good, you know, blood spray on the snow and stuff. And I was like, well, that looks good. Like, that looks like I wiped them out, you know? And
right.
I was like, well, I'll walk over to that corner and start from there, because I'm pretty sure I saw him leave, you know? But I walk over to that corner, and man, that deer had piled up. Like, he had ran for about 3 seconds and just piled up dead. Like, I double lunged him.
Wow.
You know? And afterwards, like, what had happened is like, that was, you know, I don't know if that was his dad. But
right.
That other buck knew him, you know, and
right.
I just killed him. And like, he walked out there and was just like, I know you're there. Like, I don't know where you're at, but like, why, you know,
right.
Why did you do that? You know, or something. I just had a different feeling about that situation, because then he went and stood with them. And that's not the first time I've experienced that, not that exact story, but like,
yeah, I've seen that before too. Like I've killed, like, I've personally not seen it with a buck, but I've seen it where I've killed like a doe, and there were other does with it, and that like the doe falls, and then the other does kind of hang around her.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean?
There was a time, long time ago, when I was in Colorado with Claypool, and he killed a really big mule deer up at Timberline, and I was up there hiking around with them, helping, trying to find the elk or whatever. And he had shot this deer, and we come back and went over there to find it. And when we come around the corner from finding it, there was this button buck fawn standing there just staring at him, you know, and it's like, you know what that is. Like,
right.
That was sad.
That was sad.
But similar scenario, you know, that big majestic deer kind of come up and was like, you know, he went and stood over that dead buck for like 10 or 15 minutes, and I, you know,
right.
That is good advice, I guess, you know, but
the, at least with this one though, you didn't have no liver shot and no long track tilt.
I know.
That was
I know it was a good, it was an amazing, the arrow flew perfect and hit right where it needed. And he was like, only alive about 3 more seconds. And so, that was like, I was super stoked at that point.
Right. Yeah. That's how you want to draw that up.
I wasn't going up there with intentions of drawing my bow back and really shooting at something, you know?
Right.
And like I drove my I have a Toyota Yaris, like a little black Toyota Yaris.
Uh-huh.
And I drive back and forth to work for mileage and stuff like that. I mean, I have a truck.
Yep.
But that day I was like, I'll save some gas because I'm just going to be driving around, you know, like, I was like, oh, so I killed this deer and I'm like, I don't have anything to deal with this. Like, I was like, I'm going to have to put him in my back of my car, like my little hatchback.
You sent me a picture of that. Yeah, I saw.
And so I didn't have anything to do. I was like, I just got to drag him out and get him home. And so like, that was it. I mean, but I was happy to do it. I mean, like,
yeah. I mean, you should have strapped him to the hood, man. You know, that's how they do it here in Pennsylvania. They make it a hood ornament.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
But he fit in there good and made a good picture. So I was like, I was super, super excited.
So let's transition here now to the Oklahoma hunt, because that one we were talking about just like a little bit before, and you were you were saying that, you know, it was one of those hunts that you learned a lot on, right? So I'm just curious and I know just from the times that we've talked, like, and it's interesting you shot that buck on the ground in Kansas, because I know you typically prefer to be in a tree. I think we talked about that before. You know, just like, you know, you'll ground hunt if it calls for it, but you do like to be in a stand if you can and stuff like that. And I know I've talked to Eddie about that too, and you know, Eddie's kind of the same way. It's like if he can be in a stand, he prefers it.
Right.
And so, you know, it's cool that Kansas buck was on the ground, and then you had this Oklahoma situation that played out like as a spot and stock that you were like, you know, you learned a ton from that one. So what happened with that Oklahoma hunt?
Okay. So, I shot that 7-pointer on the 15th. I think I basically went back. The wind was still out of the west. I went back and sat in the same tree the next day, I believe, because I really didn't mess anything up. And so I felt pretty good about going back. Anyways, I only had one west wind stand anyway, so that's where I go, and that's what I spend my time from daylight till dark. That's pretty much how I ruled that one out.
Right.
But and so I went back to see if there was any better deer, you know, a good deer that would come back. And so I sat there from daylight till I don't remember what time it was, around 1 p.m. I think. And I don't rattle much, but I just rattled a little bit. And then I looked over this little berm and I saw a good buck, and he's like 35 yards or so, and he's limping off. I could tell he was leaving and he was limping, but I could tell he was pretty good one. Like 8-pointer that was just narrow, real narrow, but real high and thick. And I was like, well, that was bad timing. He probably didn't want to hear like any sort of challenge, you know?
Right.
And so he limped off, and I think I can't remember if I sat there. I think I sat there the rest of the day. And so the next day after that, I had sat half a day. I sat in that same stand. It was out of the west. It was going to be out of the west, and then it was going to switch to the north at some point. And so I sat in that same tree. It was out of the west, and it was probably 1 o'clock or so before things were going to start switching. And so I got down, and I was going to actually float from this west wind stand and float all the way down river. And I had a different tree that would work for north, which was like half a mile away, and or probably farther than that. I guess it's probably like a mile. But I was gonna float all the way down there and save myself some walking.
Right.
And so I'm floating my way down there, and I'm kind of going along this. You know, you can have like gradual beach where you can park, and then you got like the steep drop off where erosion, you know, just breaks the bank off. You know, and I was kind of just floating with the current, and I was all along that steep part, and there was this. I was like, I want to see where the first deer trail is from the beginning of the steep to where they're coming down, you know? And I go a little ways, and here's like there's a deer trail, you know, coming down that steep bank. And I'm familiar with the area. I know there's some bedding probably right there and stuff like that, but I'd never like tried to go up the steep banks really. And so I've talked about my conscious or my little voice, my little guide.
Right.
And it was like, hey, it was like, you need to stop and check out that trail. I was like, all right. And I usually try to listen to that thing, you know. And
it's right. It's right more often than not, I would say. Like just
it's always right
in general. You know what I mean? It's like anytime I've like trust my gut, and I'm like, I
screwed. No, it's always right.
Yeah.
That little voice is always right. Sometimes the other one, they sound the same, and it's like, don't pull the trigger, and it's like, no.
right, yeah. Because that little voice, I ignored it once in Kansas this year, and it cost me $1. So
yeah. So it was like, hey, like, you know, it's just one of those moments where like you need to listen, and it was like you need to check that trail, and so I whipped the canoe around and kind of parked and jumped out, and I could see these tracks coming down it, and I know what's right above it. I know the place. I was like, I'm going to peek my head up, and I'm going to see some tall grass. Like, that's what's going to be there. And so I take and I've got my release on, but I park the canoe and I jump out and I take 2 steps up the bank, and then my voice, it goes, dude, it's like, grab your bow. You have your paddle in your hand. And I stopped for a second, and I was like, no, I was like, 2 more steps. I'm going to peek above the bank, and then I'm done. And I didn't listen. I take 2 steps, and I peek above the bank, and I see tall grass. And then about 10 yards out, that buck that I saw the day before stands up. And he had glimpsed his way down there and had laid there for another day, you know. And he stands up, and I duck back down. And like it happened in about half a second. My head poked up and went back down. And I took like 2 giant steps, threw the paddle down, grabbed my bow, put an arrow on it, took 2 steps up. And I was like, okay, and I was in a totally terrible, awkward situation, but my right foot was way up high because I took a big step up, and I needed to take a big step up and have my left foot up high because I shoot right-handed, you know?
Yep.
So my right leg is as far up as it can get. And that, like I said, that buck was about 10 yards away from the bank. He was in the grass. And so I'm like, he's going to be over there. I'll be able to draw back and then like raise up, you know?
Right.
And so my right foot's up. I look up at the top of the bank, and I see his antlers. And he had evidently got totally curious at what ducked down.
Right.
And he had walked all the way over to the bank. And I was like, oh gosh. And so I kind of raised my arrow up with my finger so it doesn't make any noise at all when I draw it back. And I get the bow dropped back, and my right foot is way up high, and I'm aimed like at least a 45-degree angle up, you know.
Right.
And I can see his full antlers down to the base. And he's about like 4 yards away from the edge, but like if he takes one more good step, I'm going to be looking at the bottom of his chin, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, man, if I see his head, I am going to shoot him like right in the head, like right in the throat patch.
Right.
and I was at full draw, and, you know, we stayed like that for a couple seconds, and then he busted and do what bucks do, and he left.
Jeez.
I'm fully convinced, like, I had taped my bow this year, like that camo tape, you know, that soft stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
I had taped up like 100% of it. I don't like shiny, reflective surfaces.
Mm-hmm.
And limbs and stickers and all that stuff, they're all a little bit glistening and whatnot. And
Yep.
I'd never done it before, but I'd 100% taped that thing up. But my cams, they're still like black, anodized, and shiny. And I know, I have a feeling like he could see that round thing and just wasn't quite sure what that was. Like, you know, the whole scenario was odd to him. Like, what jumped me up out of my bed kind of, and like, why did it disappear? And
right.
He just wasn't sure, so he left, you know. And so
yeah. And the lesson there is listen to that little voice in your head. And
oh my gosh, the lesson is listen to your gut, man. Like, always listen to it. It's like,
yeah, it's
immediately.
Yeah, I mean it'll steer you right. You know, and that was the hard lesson. Yeah, I've told this story.
Oh gosh,
100
and
times.
I knew it because, like, you know, hindsight. But let's say I listen. Hey, dude, grab your bow. Okay, grab my bow. I'd probably knock an arrow just to get ready. I'm not saying I'd be drawn back,
right?
But no, I wouldn't even have knocked the arrow. I would have grabbed my bow, and I'd have took 2 steps up and peeked up there, and he would have like stood up. I'd have ducked back down, knocked an arrow, drew it back, and now we know he would have been walking straight at me. You know,
and you've already would have been up high enough to where your feet would have been. I would have been
a full draw at the edge of the bank, and then raised up. Maybe got an arrow off. Maybe he would have stood there and been like, "Whoa, what is that?" Or he could have just took off and bolted out of there. You never know.
Yeah.
But I didn't listen.
Yeah.
I had a paddle in my hand.
Yeah.
I had a big bucket, like 10 yards with a paddle. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, there's one story when I was in Missouri. I had a deer that was my buddy Zach was with me filming it, and it was actually for tethered, and like you don't see the buck because it happened so fast he couldn't get the camera on the video, but you see my face afterwards.
Yeah.
And we stopped along this cedar thicket, and I was like, I gotta take a leak. So I'm taking a leak by this tree, and all of a sudden I hear all this crashing coming out of the cedar thicket, and there's this doe running right at me, and I thought she was gonna run over me. She turns to her right, you know, my left, and just misses me. There was a little buck chasing her, and then like a 150-inch deer chasing both of them. And they both ran right by me. I could have reached out and grabbed that big buck's antlers. Like he ran by me that close. Like he never saw me. I still to this day don't think he saw me. I think he was just following the ground scent of that doe. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
And the only thing I had in my hand was what I was going to the bathroom with. That was it. You know what I mean? Like I was like, that was like one of the weirdest encounters I've ever had in my life. You know what I mean? Was that?
Yeah.
But well, cool, man. Well, buddy, I've taken up about, you know, an hour and a half of your time here. I want to be sensitive to your time and let you get on with your evening. But I always do appreciate you coming on, man. I always enjoy the stories. I always enjoy the lessons learned and how you approach things and how thoughtful you are, you know, about when you're spending your time in the timber and just being aware of what it's given you. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and I'm glad your little girl's doing good, man.
Yeah, I appreciate everything, and she's doing good. So we're back at it.
Awesome, man. Well, let people know. Are you on social and stuff anymore? Is there any place people could follow along on any of your hunts or anything like that?
Not really.
Not really. Well, okay. We'll just you got to tune in here every so often to get.
I'm bad about that stuff,
to get the stories.
But yeah, well, you'll have to check in and keep everybody updated.
That's right, buddy. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on, dude. You have yourself a good evening, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there as well. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. Before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Spartan Forge, Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.